We will look into the basics first, right? So this is the agenda. We'll be looking into risk management introduction, and then we'll move on to see what are the various risk management processes. There are 6 risk management processes within this risk management knowledge area. 5 out of 6 fall under project planning process group. Only 1 falls under monitoring and control process group. This goes to say that planning is extremely important when it comes to risk management. You spend major chunk of your work on planning risk management activities. All right. So these are the 6 processes which we have. Let me ask this question first. What is the difference between risk and an issue? Can someone see me?
I mean, risk is something which could have impact in future,
Okay.
and issue is something, I mean, which is impacting right now.
True. Right. Exactly right. So if I draw this and if I say this is past and this is future, then we classify risk to be falling in this zone, future zone. Risk is an uncertain event which might happen. I'm speaking about future. It might happen, right? So risk is always in future, and risks are managed using risk management. Issue is something which has already happened in the past or which is happening now or which is 100% certain to occur. That is classified as issue. Probably we can classify and mention that issue would fall into this quadrant. Yeah, and issues are managed using issue management. Risks are managed using risk management. Risk is an uncertain event which occurs in future. Issue is something which has already occurred or which is 100% certain to occur. This is the basic difference between risk and an issue. And then look into this, risk attitudes and factors which influences. What is a risk attitude? Your stakeholders or your organization, maybe they want to take risk. So they have this risk-taking ability. They want to take risk. They have high risk-taking ability. Few other individuals or stakeholders or organizations might be risk averse. They do not want to take risk, right? So these are the two ends of the spectrum. And that is risk attitude. Risk attitude depends on 3 factors. One is called as risk appetite. Second thing is risk tolerance. And the third thing is risk threshold. What do you mean by risk appetite? It is the amount of risk an organization is willing to take. It is a degree of uncertainty an individual or an organization is willing to take. Of course, they are taking this risk because they want to be rewarded. So they anticipate that they would be rewarded, hence they are taking some risk. How much risk are they willing to take is a risk appetite. Then comes risk tolerance. It is an acceptable variance. You might have your effort variance or schedule variance limits, specification limits as plus or minus 10%. This plus or minus 10% is nothing but your tolerance level. It varies from organization to organization. Few organizations probably they'll have an effort variance specification limit or tolerance level of plus minus 1% maybe. All right. So that is my risk tolerance. What is the degree? What is the extent of risk that an organization or an individual will withstand? Beyond this, beyond these tolerable levels, I cannot withstand. I, as an individual, will get into losses. My organization might be bankrupt, might go bankrupt if I cross these threshold limits. Oh, sorry, yeah, tolerance level. Tolerance levels, sorry. The third thing is risk threshold. It measures the level of uncertainty at which a stakeholder may have a specific interest. Though my tolerance level is plus or minus 10%, say these are my tolerance limits for effort variance, for example. This is plus 10% and this is minus 10%. I can tolerate, and my company has the financials to tolerate at this level. But I will say that though I am tolerable at that level, I do not want these limits to exceed plus or minus 8%. Yeah. So anything beyond this, I am not going to tolerate. If you say that effort variance is 9%, I'll not tolerate. My organization cannot tolerate that. Though I have a cushion here of 2%, I'm not going to tolerate if it's beyond 8%. So that is how you'll have to interpret these terminologies: risk tolerance and risk threshold. Okay, now let us look into risk management plan. As we have already discussed, the first process of most of the knowledge areas would be coming up with a plan for that knowledge area. So here we would be coming up with a risk management plan. Let me introduce another thing here. In all of your plan risk management, or in all of your processes which actually helps you come up with the management plan, for example, your project management plan itself, or your plan scope management, plan time management, plan cost management, plan quality management, plan communication management, right, and plan stakeholder management, so on and so forth. For each and every process which actually comes up with a management plan, we will be having project charter as an input. Remember this. Project charter, which has high level information, would always be input whenever you want to come up with any management plan. Okay. Let us look into the inputs first. Why do you think project management plan is an input here? Project management plan is an input because it contains all the subsidiary plans and the 3 baseline documents. And you need to check whether your risk management is in line with these management plans and the 3 baseline documents or not. Right? So you need to identify risks which are going to impact your scope management plan, scope baseline document. You need to identify risks which might affect your schedule baseline document. You need to identify risks which are going to impact your cost baseline, basically, right? So hence project management plan is an input here. What information would be available in project charter? Would I have high level information or detail level information? Project charter always contains high level information. Let me ask you this question. Which component of project charter would be relevant for my risk management? What do you think? Which component of project charter would be relevant for me in risk management?
Budget and risk area
Budget
and risk. I mean, risk itself defined in the project charter,
absolutely,
right?
you got it. High level risks, which are part of your project charter, is relevant in this particular section, in this particular process. And also high level project description, high level requirements. These two also give you information on what kind of risks you need to identify. Okay. The next input is stakeholder register. You might have discussed about stakeholder register yesterday. So let me ask you this question. What are the components of stakeholder register? What are the various sections of stakeholder register?
It will have stakeholder name, contact number,
Yes.
uh, description, impact,
Yeah.
influence.
Yes. And it also classifies a particular stakeholder as positive stakeholder or negative or neutral, right? So these are the various details which are part of your stakeholder register. It contains the name of the people, their contact details, roles, what are their expectations, etc. And also it classifies a person as positive stakeholder or negative or neutral stakeholder. Okay. EF, enterprise environmental factors. I'll explain using the same example quickly. Suppose this is the organization that you're working in, and this is the project which you are performing. Think about these things: your marketplace conditions, your government regulations, some kind of statutory norms, political climate, currency fluctuations. All these are external to your organization, hence they would be obviously external to your project. Think about currency fluctuation here. If $1 is equal to 62 rupees, probably you'll get into a deal with the client, an agreement with the client, and you start making some profits. If tomorrow $1 becomes 70 rupees, your profits are going to increase because a US client is outsourcing to India, suppose. Your profits will increase and you're positively impacted. If same $1 comes down to 40 rupees, your profits would sink, your profits would reduce, and you would be negatively impacted. So anything on which you do not have a direct control on, which might impact your project in a positive or negative way, is classified as EEF. Think about this. There could be things which could be internal to your organization, but external to your project. Your organization culture, your organization structure, your stakeholders' risk-taking tolerance, right? Their risk attitudes, their risk thresholds. All these are going to impact your project. Assume you're working with an innovation-based company where your organization says take risk, and you're a project manager who also wants to take risk. If you want to take risk and if your organization says take risk, then your risk attitudes are matching. If your risk attitudes match, you would be positively impacted, right? Suppose you're working in an organization which is service-based, service-oriented organization. The senior management there says, please don't take risk, and You're a project manager who wants to take risk. So your attitudes, risk-taking attitudes, are not matching. There's a mismatch. Hence, it is going to have a negative impact on your project. Going back to the definition, anything on which you do not have a direct control on, which might impact your project in a positive or negative way, is classified as EEF, Enterprise Environmental Factors. There is also something called as PMIS, Project Management Information Systems. How do you collect information? Where do you store it? And how do you disseminate this information? These three things are performed in your PMIS, or can be classified as PMIS. Suppose you're performing a project for a government department, say bike registration or vehicle registration, road transport authority. When you go for your license or when you go to have your vehicle registered, how do they collect information on a piece of paper, right? Where do they store it? On a file cabinet. How do they distribute it? The entire file gets distributed. Assume you're a project manager working in this kind of an environment and you want access to some document. What will you do? You'll have to go search all the file cabinets, try to figure out where the particular document is. It's going to be cumbersome. It will consume a lot of time. So it's going to have a negative impact on your project. Assume you're working in an organization where everything is automated. They collect the information electronically, they store it in a database, and they distribute the information on a click of a button. If you're performing a project in this kind of an environment, if you want access to any document, you can quickly retrieve it. And it is going to have a positive impact on your project. So going back to the definition, anything on which you do not have a direct control on, which might influence your project in a positive or negative way, is classified as EEF. All right. Now let us look into OPA. Suppose you're expected to come out with a risk management plan. You need not go to Google, you need not go to net and search for risk management plan templates. Instead, what you have to do is you have to go to your organizational process asset, your quality management system, search for risk management plan template. You'll get one. And that template would be relevant to your organization. It'll be relevant to your firm. It will have sections which are relevant to your organization, your industry. Pick that, start filling the relevant sections, job done. Or you might want to look into risk management plans which are already filled by previous similar kind of projects. Search for that and start filling. Make tweaks here and there as required and your job is done. But while I do that, I do not want to repeat my mistakes. So I look into lessons learned. What were the bad things which people have done while coming up with risk management plan? I also want to look into the best things that they have done, good things, and I want to repeat that. So I look into best practices. I look into what are the good things which people have done while coming up with the risk management plan. And I want to repeat that. Right? So in short, OPA contains the templates, historical information of previous projects. It contains the knowledge base. It also contains the lessons learned and best practices. Once your risk management plan is complete, do you need to send it to client for approval, or do you need to send it to sponsor, or do you need to send it to vice president of your department for approval, or you can take a call and say that, yeah, This is the final list, or this is the finalized project plan. But what should you do, right? For this, you will have to once again refer to OPA. You'll have to look into what is a process which has to be followed, or what is a procedure, what is a guideline on what to do with the risk management plan, right? So these are the various things which are part of your OPA. Pay very close
I have
attention.
one question.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So the OPA, is it prepared during the project, or is it all? It is like a manual for a company.
It's like manual for the organization. It is already there available. So most new organizations, even before they get started, they put down the process,
Mhm.
which is this. And on an ongoing basis, any project that is performed, they update their details in this OPA. Right. As in how
Yes.
you mature in the organization based on the changing environment, you also tend to change your process, right? So once you make any change to your process, that also triggers updates to your OPA. So these are the various reasons why you update your OPA.
I see. So will it be always called as the organizational process set, or does it have a different name?
Now, in few organizations, they call it as QMS, Quality Management System, right? I'm not sure what they call it. Okay, in Infosys, I think they call it as Pride, right? In Deloitte, they call it as Quest. So they can give their own name. Doesn't matter. But when you go for ISO certifications, mostly they term this as QMS, Quality Management System.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So there are various names, company specific. All right. Let us look into analytical techniques in a while, but before that, let us discuss about expert judgment. You're not expected to be expert in each and every domain. However, PMI strongly recommends that you make use of subject matter experts to get the job done. Think about this. I was part of this project, by the way. There is a bank in Australia by name National Australian Bank, and if you see Wikipedia, you'll see bunch of acquisitions which this particular bank has done. So this bank was going on acquisition spree. They were acquiring many small banks, right, in Australia basically. So whenever you acquire a bank, according to APRA, Australian Prudential Regulatory Authority, according to this, the acquired company's database, pool of information database, should be merged with National Australian Bank's database, the data warehouse that National Australian Bank has. And then in the next quarterly result, you need to announce the results together as one company. If you fail to do so, this acquired company's profits cannot be realized by this company. Suppose National Australian Bank has acquired, say, ABC Bank, and it failed to do this particular merger of databases within a quarter, and they could not announce the quarterly results by including this acquired bank's details. If that is the case, then according to APRA, this acquired company, whatever profits you get from this acquired company, cannot be realized by this National Australian Bank. Who is going to explain you about all these things? Suppose you are working on a merger or acquisition project, M&A. Who is going to tell you about these things? Are you expected to be an expert as a project manager and know all these finer nuances? No, right? Hence, you need to rely on subject matter experts. Probably you go and hire financial risk managers, FRM. By the way, FRM is another certification from GARP, Global Association of Risk Professionals. Very covert in nature. You can just look into that. You also have energy risk professionals and all that from GARP. I think these are the two primary certifications which GARP provides. All right. So you probably go and hire a financial risk manager, or if you're from energy sector, maybe energy risk professional is going to give you more insights about the risks. Expert can be a team member who might have previously worked on similar kind of project. Expert can also be a project manager of a different project altogether. Expert can be an external consultant, or expert can be an external organization also. Okay. What are meetings? Meetings are the normal meetings which you perform. The one thing that you need to bear in mind is do not have meetings in silos only with your team members. Include all the relevant stakeholders who might add value to your projects, to your meetings. Probably you want to involve risk manager in your meetings. Probably you want to involve risk analysts. Maybe you want to include your contract managers who review the contracts. Maybe they're going to give you better insights, right? And then comes analytical techniques. Let us discuss this. In risk management context, these are few things which fall under analytical techniques. Stakeholder risk attitudes. Is a stakeholder risk averse or risk seeking, or he's an average person who uses a combination of taking risk and avoiding the risk? And what is the risk exposure of the given project? You might also want to look into the strategic risk scoring sheets, which are used to calculate high-level assessment of risk exposure of the project. Not sure whether this is visible to you or not. Otherwise, let me read it out for you. Strategic risk scoring sheets. You'll have a check sheet. You will have a bunch of points available. So the first point here says the business driver behind the project is clearly stated and is visible to all members of the project team. Right? The business sponsor and the business visionary demonstrate clear ownership of the project. Do you strongly agree with that, or do you agree? Are you neutral on that? Do you disagree or strongly disagree with this? Say I say here I strongly agree, here I'm neutral. In the third checkpoint I agree, fourth one I disagree, fifth one I strongly disagree, sixth also I do so, strongly disagree. And then I disagree with. So if I select my options in this way, it is going to give me a risk score at the end. And if the risk score is greater than some X number, I would say that I'm not even going to start my project because the risk score is beyond my risk taking ability, beyond my risk threshold. This is called a strategic risk scoring sheets. And this is part of your analytical techniques. Nothing, even before my project starts, I have a bunch of questions which I need to answer. Based on what options I select, there is a risk score which is going to come up. And this risk score will tell me whether I am beyond my threshold limits or not. If I'm beyond my threshold limits, I'm going to halt my project. I'll say I'll not start this. It's not strategically feasible for me. And that is analytical technique here in this scenario. And then you will get, yes, please.
So from this, we should be able to find out the risk score, right?
Yes.
But how do I know the threshold
Now that I set
of a project?
that I set up. It will be defined at an organization level. What is my risk tolerance? What is my risk threshold? It will be set at my organization level. Already you'll have these kind of values in place.
Yeah, I mean, I saw this, but how would you arrive at a number? So this is done by the PMO or?
Yeah, it's in some scenarios done by PMO. In some scenarios, even your senior stakeholders get involved. It is done probably by board of directors. It depends, but you'll have one in place.
Okay.
They'll classify if it's a strategic project, if it is greater than $1 million, this is the risk which we can take. If the number of dollars is say 100K or less than 500K, probably you can go up with your risk tolerance or threshold. So it all depends. They'll do a lot of mix and match. And finally, they give you this checklist, which you'll have to fill up, right? And the output is going to automatically look into your organization values and give a pop-up saying that, no, this is a risky project beyond the strategic objectives, hence you should not start this, kind of. In a well set up organization, right? This is what happens. Then you have risk breakdown structure. Any breakdown structure for that case looks like this. This will help you look into the various risk categories. So I'm having categories such as schedule risks, cost risk, scope related risks. I might even want to have resource related risks, infrastructure related risks, and all that. Breakdown structure, any breakdown structure looks like this. Work breakdown structure, organization breakdown structure, so on and so forth. Okay, let us look into the components of risk management plan. It contains details on what is the methodology that you are going to adopt, what tools are you going to use, what data sources you are going to look into to perform your risk management activities, roles and responsibilities. Maybe you'll say that I want a risk manager to be working full time on the project if it's a big strategic project for you. Or you might want to say that, do you know what, this project is of low value in nature, hence I'm going to have one of my team member perform the risk management activities. Or I'll say that this the client who's outsourcing the work for the first time, so probably we need to have a contract manager on the project to review the contract and unearth the risks. These are the various roles and responsibilities that I'm going to define for my project. Budgeting. How much budget do you need to assign resources to perform risk management activities on your project? How much budget do you require to set aside reserve for your project? Timing. When do you want to perform risk management activities and how often do you want to perform? Is it a project which would last for 1 year and the client is outsourcing for the first time? Then probably you want to do risk management activities on a weekly basis. And before your project starts, for the first 1 month, I want to invest only on risk management activities, identifying the risks. Maybe. So this kind of timing you will have to mention in your risk management plan. And this would be specific to your project. You also come up with the various risk categories. What are the various risk categories? Do I want to document schedule related risks? Do I want to document human resources related risks? Do I want to document cost related risks, scope related risks, requirements, security related risks? You categorize. And the last thing, but the most important thing, is definitions of risk, probability, and impact. Let me ask you this question. I have ICICI Bank portal, web portal. And suppose this ICICI web portal, the server goes down at 11 p.m. IST. What is the kind of impact it's going to have on the customers? Low impact or high impact?
Low impact.
Low impact? Are you sure? Will people only in India be accessing this? NRIs across the globe will also be accessing it. 11 p.m. IST might be morning time for people who are in the US. So it's going to have similar kind of impact according to me. Think about a manufacturing plant which is very local to say Hyderabad region. I have a manufacturing plant in Hyderabad and they have an SAP system. Now this SAP portal goes down at 11 p.m. IST. What is the kind of impact it is going to have on the users?
It will be low impact.
Low
Because
impact,
it's
absolutely
local.
yes. It's localized, right? So the definition of impact and the definition of probability might change based on the geography, based on the customer, based on the industry, etc. Think about this. I'm doing a project in Japan. What is the probability that I might be hit by earthquake? I'm working in Japan, and what is the probability that I might be affected by earthquake?
Very high.
Very high, right? Very high. Probability is very high. I'm working in Bengaluru, and then what is the probability that I might be impacted by earthquake? Low. So depending on the geography that you're working in, depending on the work timings, depending on the industry that you're in, your definitions of probability and impact are going to change. And we know that every project is different. Hence, we need to document probability and impact definitions which are specific to our organization, specific to our project. In the same organization, two projects might be having different definitions of probability and impact. This is because you might be dealing with different clients. So it'll be very specific to your project. All right. Now that we have risk management plan in place, let us try to identify risks. Sorry. Why do we have risk management plan as an input here? Can someone tell in one word? In one word? How? How do I identify risks? What are the various tools and techniques that I need to use? Just because there are 7 tools and techniques does not mean I'm going to use all 7. I might use only one, I might use combination of 2 or 3, or I might end up using everything. But what tools and techniques am I going to use? This information would be part of my risk management plan. Second thing is cost management plan. It provides you with the process and the controls that can be used to help identify risks across the project. You need to set aside some budget for your project in order to perform risk management activities. So how much budget have you set aside? And also probably you can look into cost management plan and get that information. Schedule management plan. This provides you information to the project timelines. which may be impacted by risks. And you need to perform risk management activities at specific duration. Maybe you decide that you will perform it on a monthly basis or a weekly basis. Right? So that information also you can get it from schedule management plan. Of course, that is anyways there in risk management plan. And then you have quality management plan. What is the quality which customer is expecting? If my customer says that I want 0 defects per release, then that is a risk for me. 0 defects. Six Sigma itself says 3.4 defects per million opportunities. Right? Think about airlines industries. Think about healthcare industries. They also cannot deliver you 0 defects. If airlines delivers 0 defects per million opportunities, then you should not be hearing any news about air crashes. Right? So they do not operate at 6 Sigma, by the way, airlines. They operate at 8 Sigma or 9 Sigma. Your healthcare also. Otherwise, in a week, there would be million flights taking off and landing. In just a week, I'm looking into domestic airplanes, international warfare, your private jets, private charters, and all that. In a week, there would be a million. So in a week, if you hear in news that there are approximately 3 or 4 crashes, that means they operate at 3 Sigma or 6 Sigma level. They operate at 8 Sigma, 9 Sigma. Few books claim that airlines operates at 12 Sigma level. Few of the airlines. So if your 6 Sigma itself says 3.4 defects per million opportunities, then if your customer says he wants 0 defects per release, it's a huge risk on your project. So these kind of quality requirements probably would get translated into risks. Then you have HR management plan. This provides you guidance on how resources should be defined. How should the resources be staffed? How do you want to manage them? And how do you want to release them virtually? It also contains the roles and responsibilities. It contains your organization chart. It also contains your staffing management plan. All right, all these things are part of HR management plan, but how will it help me in identifying risks? Maybe a particular skill that you want on the project is very scarce in the market. That's a risk. Maybe there is a huge demand for a particular profession. Maybe that is a risk. Out of context, do you guys know that data scientist or business analytics kind of profession is fast picking up? Or let me show you that out of context. Just bear with me for a minute. Very interesting for people who want to switch careers and all that. I'm not saying this. Harvard Business Review is saying this. Data scientist, business analytics would be the next big thing. It's already the big thing. Look at this. The sexiest job of the 21st century. And I believe the salaries of these data scientists are skyrocketing. And few days back, I've seen it in Economic Times. Salaries of data scientists. Not sure if this is that. And this profession is going to rule the world at least for the next 5 years, according to various research organizations. Yeah, look at this. I mean, it's quite possible, right? Drawing 1.5 crores is quite possible. Paytm is paying, or it's planning to hire a team of 8 data scientists in Canada, paying 250K. Now Bala is stationed there. You must be knowing, Bala, that 250K is not a small amount at all, by any means, right? And in India, I know most of my friends who are data scientists and who are falling into this bracket, 50 lakhs. Think about 50 lakhs. It's a huge amount in India. All right, just explore this when you find time. It's the best profession after your actuarials. Has anyone heard about actuaries? Actuarial as profession? Actuaries?
No.
No? Okay. Actuary is a profession wherein people come up with your insurance policies, new schemes in financial service insurance domain, industry basically. For each hour, a person who has 8 years of experience gets paid up to 700K, sorry, $700 per hour. The person who has 8 years of experience gets paid so much. American actuaries, I think they have 7 papers which you will have to clear. But after this, I would say it's data scientists who get paid so much. Of course, not $700 per hour, but probably $300, $350 per hour in US. Okay. Then we have scope baseline. Can someone tell me what are the 3 components of scope baseline document?
Project scope statement, create WBS dictionary.
Yes. It's approved project scope statement, WBS and WBS dictionary. You need to know what are the risks associated with the work packages, hence work breakdown structure is required. If you want more information about that work package, you anyways have work breakdown structure dictionary, WBS dictionary, which will help you identify that. And what are the few of the components of approved project scope statement? You will have assumptions, you will have constraints,
Constraints,
right?
exclusions.
Acceptance criteria, exclusions, end scope, and all that, right? So look into these assumptions. If there is an assumption and if that goes wrong, what would happen? That is a risk to your project. You have assumed that the client is going to pay for your travel cost. But what if client says, no, I do not have the budget for that? Then it's a risk. It's going to eat into your profits. And all these assumptions would undergo assumption analysis. You're going to analyze all those assumptions. And for those assumptions which you feel are critical, you're going to identify them as risks and register in your risk register. Then you have activity cost estimates. Is the cost assigned to an activity sufficient to complete the activity within the cost? Or are you being stingy? Have you assigned very less cost to an activity? If you have assigned very less cost to an activity, then that in itself is a risk. Activity duration estimates. Have you assigned sufficient duration for each and every activity? If you have assigned less duration for an activity, it is again a risk. You'll come to know only if you look into these inputs. Then you have stakeholder register. A negative stakeholder for me is a risk, right? And also I need to interview the stakeholders to identify more risks. Hence, I have stakeholder register as an input here. You need to identify risks from key stakeholders, key sponsors. All right. I might want to look into few of the project documents, such as my project charter. I might want to look into my issue log. I want to look into my quality checklist. I might want to look into my project schedule to identify risks. Procurement documents. If I have a vendor, what if that vendor has a tendency of not delivering goods on time? It is a risk for me. I have a supplier. He never supplies me laptops on time. That's a risk. So you look into your procurement documents also. You look into what is the complexity of the products that you want from the prospective suppliers or vendors. And accordingly, I classify that as a risk or not. EF and OPA, we are not going to discuss about these two because we have already discussed those. Expert judgment also I'm not going to discuss. Documentation reviews. It's a structured review of all the project documentation. I might be having various plans with me, like cost management plan, schedule management plan, quality management plan, HR management plan. And probably I want to review each and every document and try to identify what are the risks out of this. I might look into my scope baseline. I might want to look into my work breakdown structure. I want to probably review that and identify the risks pertaining to that. Right. So all that is documentation review. I'm reviewing all the documents with the aim to identify risks within that. Then we have information gathering techniques. Let me go to that. Information gathering techniques. There are 4 primarily. One is brainstorming. You call all your stakeholders into a single forum and then you ask them to help you identify risks. All you need to do is document each and every risk. However stupid the risk might be, you will have to document it in brainstorming. If you criticize one person's idea, the other people will not open up. With that understanding, you just write down all the risks. Second technique is called as Delphi technique. Suppose I have 3 super experts or 4 super experts, right? Everyone is extremely intelligent. I want them to help me identify risks. Do you know what would happen? There would be tug of war, fight in the room. The moment this person says, yeah, hey, this is the risk that I foresee, the other people will quickly jump in and say that, no, this seems like it's not a risk. Why? Because everyone wants to make sure that they are superior than the others. This is what happens if you bring in a bunch of super experts to a single forum. Do you remember Lehman Brothers? What happened to Lehman Brothers? Because of that particular financial firm, entire recession was, triggered basically in US. They had bunch of all the super folks. They have hired all the folks from the top-notch B schools. And once you have that environment, and if you assume that you're going to do exceptionally well because you're hiring bunch of super experts, it would not happen in that way, right? They would fight among themselves. They'll not come to a common conclusion. You face all these difficulties, right? Hence, under such circumstance, you need to use Delphi technique. What does Delphi technique say? Delphi technique says that approach each expert individually and say that you are keen on identifying few of the risks for your project. approach this person, white, blue person, pink person, and then this black person, right? And then when you go to this person A assumes that he's the only person whom you have approached. When you go to person B, you'll not mention that you have approached person A. You'll just say that you have come to this person B, you want to identify risks. So the details are kept anonymous. No one comes to know who else has worked on this in identifying risks. These 4 people give you risks. Once you get risks from person A, you give the same sheet to person B and say, hey, here I have identified few risks. Can you help me review these? Do you think few more risks should be added or few risks should be deleted? Can you help me with that? The moment you get risks from person B, you hand it over to person C. And person C's risk, you're going to give it to person D. The moment person D has the risk, you give it to person A. In this way, you'll try to get expert consensus by keeping their names anonymous. No one comes to know who else has worked on that. But still you're getting the views of all 4 folks. You'll repeat it for 1 round or 2 rounds or 3 rounds. And after 3 or 4 rounds, you'll not have many changes. So that is when you stop. Without conflicts, you're trying to identify the risks from the experts. That's the most interesting part. Next comes interviewing. If you have senior folks, if you have vice presidents, if you have CXOs of the company, right, you cannot call them for a normal brainstorming session. Instead, you want to do a one-on-one interview with them and quickly try to identify the risks. That is called as interviewing. And then you have root cause analysis. You can either use fishbone diagram, which is also called as Ishikawa diagram or cause and effect diagram, to identify the root cause, or you might also want to use 5 why analysis. We have already discussed these tools and techniques in your quality management. Okay. We also have diagramming techniques. Cause and effect diagram, it is also called as Ishikawa diagram or fishbone diagram, which we have already discussed. We have spent sufficient time in discussing about the flow charts, process analysis, value stream mapping, and all that. Next, you have influence diagrams. Here is a simple example. Here, you have a decision node. What is a decision? Vacation activity is a decision. And you have 2 uncertainty nodes. Whether condition, whether forecast, based on that, your vacation would be decided. And you also have one value node, which is satisfaction. If the weather condition is good and if your vacation goes on as planned, you will be satisfied. But weather condition is going to help you forecast the weather, and that is going to help define your vacation activity. Right? So this is called as influence diagram. Each component influences the other component, other nodes basically. Okay. So this is the fishbone or Ishikawa diagram, which we have already discussed. Head of the fish contains the effect, the problem. What is the problem? These are the broad categories that you have. And then these bones help you identify the causes. What is causing this problem? What is causing this problem? Which is related to people category. If I have this cause, and if there is another arrow attached in this way, that's kind of doing YY analysis or 5 why analysis, right? It's primary cost and that's the secondary cost. And you always have to look into the secondary or tertiary, or you need to go and ask yourself 5 why. 5 why will actually help you get at the root cause, and you need to fix that root cause. That's the intention of performing this exercise, cause and effect diagram. There are a few tools and techniques which we will have to discuss. One thing is checklist analysis. I have a checklist which I use. Suppose I'm manufacturing shirts. I have a checklist which says, look into whether the buttons are stitched properly or not. See whether handcuffs are stitched or not. See whether the collar is stitched properly or not. And all these things, right? You have a checklist analysis. You analyze and you see that, hey, this particular checkpoint probably should be classified as a risk. You do that. Last thing is SWOT analysis. What does SWOT stand for? S stands for strength, W for weakness, O for opportunity, and T for threats. Strengths and weaknesses are internal to your project. Opportunities and threats are external to your project. I have 5 data scientists on my project, analytics project. That is my strength. Weakness is that 3 of these 5 are getting married and will be on a 2-month leave. Opportunities. There are 10 more data scientists who are sitting on bench. Threat. There are a lot of opportunities outside in the market, so they might leave. So your SWOT analysis in itself will help you identify many risks. Okay, and all these risks which you have identified, you will have to place it in some document. And I'm going to call the document as risk register. So the risk register contains all the identified risks, and it also contains the potential risk responses. Let me ask you this question and let us see who is sleeping, who is awake listening to this session. Okay, here is a question. Even before that, let me go back to the list of processes that we have. Okay, here are the 6 processes that we have, and here is my question. In which process do you identify initially the risk responses? In which process do you initially identify risk responses? Option A, plan risk management. Option B, identify risks. Option C, perform qualitative risk analysis. Option D, plan risk responses.
Identify risks.
Absolutely right.
Yes.
Initial risk responses or potential risk responses would be identified here. But in planned risk responses, you'll have the final risk response. Initial risk response, final risk response. Please remember this. Please remember this. Extremely important. Just because you see there is planned risk responses, so you should not jump in here. Let me ask you this question. In which process do you identify risk responses for positive and negative risks? Option A, plan risk management. Option B, identify risks. Option C, perform qualitative risk analysis. Option D, plan risk responses.
Plan risk management.
No, it is plan risk responses. My question was, in which process do you identify or do you plan risk responses for positive and negative risks? You do it in this plan risk responses. Remember from exam perspective. All right, let us move on. Now suppose I've identified 1,000 risks. Suppose I've identified 1,000 risks as part of my identify risks process. Do I have time and energy and money to invest on all 1,000 risks? And are all 1,000 risks equally important for me? That is a question which I ask. No, all 1,000 risks may not be equally important for me. So what do I do next? Probably I need to prioritize those risks which are critical. Yes, you're right. How do I prioritize? I'm going to probably apply probability and impact to each and every risk. And that is how I'm going to identify or prioritize the risks. Right. But first, let us look into inputs and then we will discuss about this in detail. Risk management plan will tell me how to perform qualitative risk analysis. It tells me what are the roles and responsibilities. Who'd be working with you on qualitative risk analysis? What is the budget set aside for performing qualitative risk analysis? What is the cost set aside? What is the schedule you have planned to perform qualitative risk analysis? What are the risk categories based on which you classify risks and perform qualitative risk analysis? All these are part of your risk management plan. Scope baseline document would contain approved project scope statement, WBS and WBS dictionary, right? Projects might use first of its kind technology, state of the art technology, and you might also encounter highly complex projects, right? And your scope baseline will help you identify that, whether your project is extremely complex or is it of low complexity, are you using state of the art technology, etc. You'll come to identify when you look into your scope baseline document. Then you have risk register. Risk register will contain all the risks which you have identified until now. Right? EF, OPA will not discuss. We have already discussed. So risk register. You have already identified thousands of risks in the previous process, which is identify risks. But I cannot spend time. I do not have money, energy to invest on all 1,000 risks. Most importantly, it might be irrelevant for me to focus on all 1,000 risks. So what do? I assign probability and impact to each and every risk. This is what I do. Suppose I have risk 1. Assign probability and impact to this risk. I'll say there's a probability of say 0.5 that I'm going to identify, or this risk is going to realize. There's a 50% chance, so I assign 0.5. It's going to have significant impact on the project. In a scale of 1 to 5, I would say it is 5. Now, I multiply probability and impact. I multiply these two to arrive at another number which is called as risk severity. It will be 2.5. There is risk 2. There is a probability, or there's a low probability that it's going to occur, say 0.1, and it's going to have a low impact. In a scale of 1 to 5, I give it 1. So it's going to be what? 1 multiplied by this will be 0.1. In this way, I'm going to multiply probability and impact of each and every risk to arrive at risk severity. And I simply prioritize and say that this risk with 2.5 severity is of high importance to me. This particular risk, which has a severity of 0.5, is a low priority risk for me. In this way, I'm going to prioritize, but I'm going to put this risk, which is of low importance to me, in watch list. Right? Why do I want to put it in watch list? Because at a later point of time, this risk, which is of low importance to me, might become a high important risk, high severity risk. We don't know. Hence, I put it on a watch list. And that is risk probability and impact assessment. Then we have probability and impact matrix. This is how it looks. So first, let us discuss about this probability and impact assessment. The level of probability of each risk and its impact on each of the project objectives. Is it going to impact my cost? Or is it going to impact my schedule or quality, or what is it going to impact? I evaluate that. And risks are rated as per probability and its impact. Risks with low rating are included in the watch list for future monitoring. Maybe I'll say that high severity risks, I'm going to look into these or evaluate these on a daily basis. Medium severity risks, maybe I'm going to evaluate these on a weekly basis. And I also will be having low severity risks. If I have low severity risks, maybe I'm going to revisit them once in a month. Yeah, so those are the risks which I put in the watch list. Risk can have a negative effect. If it has a negative effect, it is called as threat. A particular risk might also have a positive effect. If it is going to have a positive effect, it is classified as opportunity. Remember the definition of risk. Risk can have positive or negative impact. If it is going to have a positive impact, I classify as opportunity. If it is going to have a negative effect, I'm going to classify as a threat. This is probability and impact assessment. I multiply probability by impact to get my risk severity. And here is my risk probability and impact matrix. I come up with a matrix, and this is the screenshot from PMBOK guide itself. Any risk might have a threat, or it might have an opportunity, or it might have combination of these two. A particular risk can have both negative impact as well as a positive impact. Right, so here I have probability values, here I have impact values, and what happens if I multiply those two it's here. Let us look into this. If I have numbers, it's pretty easy, just multiplication and then I'll get those values. But think about having these kind of things. Instead of using the probability as 0.9, 0.7, 0.5, 0.3 and 0.1, I can also use high, very high, medium, low, very low. But only if I have risk probability and impact matrix, these things become clear. If there are numbers, I simply can multiply those. But think about this. There is a risk with low impact and high probability. If I multiply high and low, what would happen? If I say 1 multiplied by 2, you would say it is 2. But if I say high multiplied by low, you'll be perplexed. If you have this matrix in place, it will make your life much easy, right? High probability multiplied by low impact is a medium risk, right? A medium risk with a high probability is going to be high severity risk, right? So this matrix is going to give me such information. All right. Next thing is risk data quality assessment. I've identified the risks, but don't you want me to check whether the data based on which I'm identifying risks is accurate or not? Can I even rely on the data which I have? Can I rely on the documents which I have, which I'm using to identify my risk? And this is a technique to evaluate the degree to which risk is understood. And you're also trying to evaluate the accuracy, quality, reliability, and integrity of the data. Basically, the data which you have at hand, is it of good quality or not? If it is of not good quality, then your entire risk management analysis will go for a toss. Hence, you're doing this. Then you categorize the risks. You categorize the risks based on sources of risk. Maybe you will say these risks are from my project charter, these risks are from my schedule management plan, these risks are from my scope baseline document, so on and so forth. Or you might also want to classify it based on areas of project affected. Maybe you're going to look into your work breakdown structure. And if it is a house construction kind of a project, you would say, these are the risks related to coming up with my foundation. These are the risks with respect to walls. These are the risks with respect to the interior decoration, etc. Or you might say, these are the risks related to my finance department. These are the risks related to my HR department. And these are the risks related to my quality department. Probably you'll classify in that way. Project phase. You might also want to categorize risks based on your phases. You might say that these are my requirements related risks. These are my design related risks. These are my coding related risks or build. These are my testing related risks. You might want to classify the risks based on your project phases also. And your common root causes. All these causes are related to people category. All these risks are related to machinery. Right? In this way, you'll probably categorize the risks. So there are multiple ways of categorizing risks. And finally, we end up updating our project documents. Let me ask you this question. I know that project documents would get updated, but what is the most obvious project document which would get updated? What is the most obvious project document which will get updated here?
The line.
Sorry?
Telling you for.
Sorry. Which project document would get updated here? There is one obvious project document. Manish says, no Manish, all the documents which are used in your project, which are not part of your project management plan, are called as your project documents. Any document other than your baseline documents and the subsidiary plans would be classified as project documents, right? So project management plan would not be that.
Risk registers?
Sorry?
Would it be in risk registers?
Absolutely right. Risk register is the one obvious document which gets updated. Why? What are we doing here in perform qualitative risk analysis? I'm assigning probability and impact to each and every risk. Where do I update this? In my risk register. Where do I prioritize the risks? based on risk severity in my risk register. Where am I going to classify my risks as low severity and put it in my watch list, in my risk register, right? So risk register is the obvious project document which will get updated here. Once I have qualitatively evaluated the risks, I then need to perform quantitative risk analysis. Let me tell you this. If there is a question around which of the processes of risk management knowledge area you would forego, you would not do if I do not give you sufficient budget and time. Which is the process of risk management knowledge area which you would not perform if I do not give you sufficient budget and time? You would say it is perform quantitative risk analysis. Perform quantitative risk analysis is considered to be extremely costly and extremely time consuming, right? Hence, you need to cautiously perform this quantitative risk analysis. Guys, just give me a minute. Let me restart the recording. Quantitative risk analysis is considered to be extremely time consuming and extremely costly because you have to do a lot of stats around this. We will look into those tools and techniques in a while. So with that context, let us get started. You do not perform quantitative risk analysis on all the risks. No, you have already done qualitative risk analysis. You have applied probability and impact to the risk. You multiplied probability and impact to arrive at severity, and based on that you have prioritized the risk. Maybe I'm going to perform quantitative risk analysis on only high severity risks, or maybe on high and medium severity risks, but not on low severity risks. It doesn't make sense. The effort that I invest on coming up with quantitative risk analysis is not worth if I'm going to do it on low severity risks. My risk management plan is going to tell me how to perform quantitative risk analysis, what tools and techniques am I going to use. Also, it's going to tell me what are the roles and responsibilities. Who is going to work with you on quantitative risk analysis? Obviously, he needs to know some maths, some stats. Right? As I've told you, it's extremely costly. So you need to know from a cost management perspective on how you're going to perform quantitative risk analysis, how much cost you're going to invest on this. Schedule management plan is going to tell you from timelines perspective, how much time do you have to perform quantitative risk analysis. And also when I perform quantitative risk analysis, I need to come up with those timelines. I need to say that this particular risk is going to have so many days of impact. This particular risk is going to have so much cost impact. So I need to know how to represent the cost in dollars, in cents, in pounds, in penny. How do I represent it? Timelines, right? I also need to mention that this risk is going to impact your project by 5 days or 5 hours or 5 minutes. What is that unit of measure? What is accuracy level and all that? Of course, I need to have risk register because I need to perform quantitative risk analysis on the risks which I've already identified and which is qualitatively evaluated. And then EFOPA we have discussed umpteen number of times, expert judgment also. So let us jump into and discuss data gathering and representation techniques. Data gathering. How do you gather information on the risks? One thing is interviewing. You do a one-on-one discussion with your key stakeholders to identify the risks. With all the key stakeholders, you do a one-on-one basically. And how do you represent? What are the representation techniques? Here you have a few. probability distribution, right? And this is beta distribution. This is how the graph would look like for a beta distribution. And then this is the triangular distribution. Now, let me explain this probability distribution. Even before that, let me ask you this question. If I'm flipping a coin once, what is the probability that I'll get a head? 50%. Does everyone agree with this? If I'm flipping a coin, what is the probability that I'll get a head? Is it
50%.
50%? Fine. If I'm flipping a coin twice, what is the probability that I'll get head? I'm flipping a coin twice. What is the probability? Let me see. 25%, 1/4. Sure. Manish says 1/4. It ranges. It ranges, right? If I'm flipping the coin first time, I might get a head or I may not get a head. If I'm flipping it second time, I might get a head or I may not get a head. So what are the various possibilities? Tail, tail, tail and head, or head and tail. All right. So these are the various possibilities. What is the probability that I'll get the head twice? Only once. 1/4. 25%. Right? What if I'm flipping a coin 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, 1,000,000 times? Right? So if I'm doing that exercise, you're telling me that there is a probability attached to each and every event. If I'm flipping a coin once, there is certain probability of 50%. If I'm flipping a coin twice, there is a 25% probability that I'll get ahead. If I'm flipping a coin thrice, there is some other probability. If I represent all these probabilities based on these events in this graphical format, it would be called as probability distribution. And this is how the graph is going to look like, right? And this is beta distribution and this is triangular distribution, by the way. And let us move on. There is also sensitivity analysis. There is modeling and simulation, which we need to understand. Just a minute. Just a minute. Sorry for that. All right. We need to understand sensitivity analysis and modeling and simulation once. Let us understand using the example which we have previously used, and then we'll move on to expected monetary value. Okay, here is a simple case study that we'll be discussing now. Week on week, I mentioned how many resources would be working on my project, the count of resources. Also, I mentioned the job levels. For example, a junior resource, there are 2 junior resources. There are 5 consultants. There is no senior consultant on my project. There is 1 manager on my project. How many hours do they work in a week? 45 hours. 9 hours each day, 5 days in a week. So if I have 2 junior resources who will work for 45 hours each, then the count will be 90 hours. So in this way, I get the number of hours available for each week. Also, I mentioned how much effort I spend on design, coding, unit testing, and system testing week on week. All right. And now, I have not yet started my project. I've just completed my planning. At this stage, do I have a provision to check whether I'll be able to complete my project on time with sufficient quality or not? If that is the question, yes. Go do an experiment in the background. Go perform this project 1,000 times in the background, and then you'll come to know what is the probability that you'll be able to complete your project on time with sufficient quality. You'll come back to me and say, are you kidding? Can I perform this project 1,000 times? Right? Do I have so much time with me? No. Can you tell me now, at this point of time, before I get started, on what is a probability that I'll be able to complete my project on time with sufficient quality? Then I'll say, yeah, there is one mechanism to do that, and that is called a simulation. Only thing is, you'll not be doing this trials and experiments on live data, but virtually it will do the same thing. So I start performing this project 1,000 times. So I do 1,000 experiments in the background virtually. That means 1,000 times I'm performing this project. I'm executing this project 1,000 times. If I do so, my model says that there is only 48.11% certainty that you'll be able to complete the project on time. And it's following log normal distribution. Here it is. Anyways, 48.11 certainty is not sufficient for me. So what would I do? I'm going to do a what if analysis. I will say that instead of just 2, 5, and 1 resources, let me increase the resources to 12, 15, and 30. I'm just doing a what if analysis, right? I'm increasing the resources just to show you. That's it. You never add so many resources. You add 1 resource or 2 resource, do what if analysis again and again. I'm just checking on how it's going to impact me. This I think did not get updated. So what is happening ideally, if I increase the number of resources, the available effort gets increased. If the available effort gets increased, let's say it got increased to 15,000 hours, my certainty has increased to 63.85. Say I'm going to increase this to 15,500. My certainty further got increased. If I'm going to make it 16,000, it became 75.73. Look at that graph also. The blue lines, blue bars keep increasing. If I make it 17,000, it's 86.98. Let me do it 17,500. It's 90.85. Probably I'll stop here and say that anything which is greater than 90% is good for me. Right? So in this way, I'm going to look into my simulation and do what if analysis. What if I increase my available effort by 1,000 hours? What if I increase by 1,500 hours? What if I increase by 2,000 hours? What is going to happen to my output? It's a simple modeling technique. All right. Now I also want to see out of design, coding, unit testing, and system testing, out of these 4 phases, which phase is extremely important for me? What can I do? How do I identify that? Simple. Just right click on that and look into your sensitivity chart, which is also called as tornado diagram, by the way. This shows that my design phase is the most sensitive sub-process. I need to closely monitor that, 53.7%. If you see carefully, it starts from 0. And these numbers are towards the positive. And the other side, you have the negative numbers, -2 and all that. You'll have -2%, -4, -6, so on and so forth towards the other extreme. So for each and every phase, I'll come to know what is the sensitivity on a positive side. I can also do that on the negative side. The next sensitive sub-process is coding, 27.8%. This is just an illustration. You need to focus on sensitivity analysis. I can identify which process is the most sensitive and which process should I majorly focus on. When it comes to defects, I need to focus on unit testing. That is what my sensitivity analysis is. Out of 1,000 risks which I have, which risk is the most sensitive? Which risks should I focus on to a great extent? So we have just looked into simulation, modeling, and sensitivity analysis. All right. Why is sensitivity also called as tornado diagram? Because it looks like this. It looks like a tornado. Suppose this is 0 for each risk. I'm going to have the negative component, and also I'll have a positive component. Risk 2, in the descending order, I'll have a negative component. I'll also have a positive component to that. Risk 3, in descending order, it gets decreased in this way. I'll have a negative component and also a positive component. So on and so forth. It keeps decreasing. Hence, it looks like a tornado to you. All right. Now let us discuss about expected monetary value. Here is an example. Suppose I need to choose between two vendors. There is vendor A and vendor B. If I go with vendor A, what is the success rate? There is 55% probability that you'll succeed, and you're going to have $70,000 as impact. That means you will gain $70,000 if you go with vendor A. And what if you fail? There is no impact, so do not worry much on that. If I go with vendor B, there is a 75% probability that you'll succeed, and you're going to save $55,000. But if you fail, there is no impact. You might ask me this question. You're only discussing about impact. Where is the probability? If I'm saying that there is a 75% probability that you're going to succeed, then it is implied that there is a 25% probability that you'll fail. 75%, 25% is 100%. If there's a 55% probability that you're going to succeed, then what is the probability that you'll fail? It's 45%. There's a 45% probability that you'll fail. 55, 45 makes it 100. All right, here's a question to you. Which vendor will you select?
B. Vendor B.
Yeah, and what is the rationale behind that? Why would you select vendor B?
It's because of the probability percentage is higher.
Yeah. But here you will save $70,000 as opposed to $55,000 here. You will have to look into probability and impact both. Multiply probability and impact. If I multiply 55% with $70,000, I get $38,500. If I multiply 75% with $55,000, I'll get $41,250. I'm looking into these two things and then decide which vendor I need to choose. If I go with vendor B, I'll get $41,250. If I go with vendor A, I'll get $38,500. Don't look just into probability or just into your impact. Look into both in tandem. Multiply probability and impact, and then choose appropriate option which best fits you. All right. This is how you do expected monetary value analysis. All right. The key output is project document. What is the most obvious project document which will get updated here?
It is the same risk register, I guess.
Absolutely. You're going to add the quantitative part to the risks. You will say what is the impact. In qualitative risk analysis, you will say whether it's going to have a high impact, medium or low impact? Or how is it going to affect your project timelines, your project cost, your project quality, etc.? But here you're going to quantify that. Think about this. I make a statement that there's a high probability that it might rain, versus I make a statement that there's a 55% probability that it is going to rain in between 5 to 7. Now it's going to give me more confidence, right? So the quantitative part is going to give more confidence to the risks. All right. I want to stop here because I think you have taken a lot today. And tomorrow we are going to look into plan risk responses and control risks. And also we are going to do a quick recap about whatever we've discussed until now.